welcome back. And today, since we've been learning about Egypt and some Egyptian gods, I thought that I could start with some mythology. I have two books here, Ancient Egyptian Myths and Legends by Lewis Spence. I've had these for a very long time. This one is having some issues, but it's still good, you know. And this one, Legends of the Egyptian Gods. So I'm going to start with this one. It's a little smaller. This one's by E.A. Wallace Budge. So we're going to start, obviously, with the first one, now that I'm looking at this. And we're going to start with the legend of the god Nebuchadnezzar and the history of creation. So I hope you enjoy this. The text of the remarkable legend of the creation, which forms the first section of this volume, is preserved in a well-written papyrus in the British Museum, acquired by the late Mr. A.H. Rind in 1861, when he was excavating some tombs on the west bank of the Nile at Thebes. The legend of the creation is found in the third work, which is given in the papyrus, and which is called the Book of Overthrowing Apep, the enemy of Ra, the enemy of Nefer or Osiris. This work contained a series of spells which were recited during the performance of certain prescribed ceremonies, with the object of preventing storms and dispersing rain clouds and removing any obstacle, inanimate or animate, which could prevent the rising of the sun in the morning or obscure his light during the day. This curious book, which when they say book, they're talking about just like scrolls of papyrus, which is what the Book of the Dead is, which we will definitely be getting into that as well. This curious book describes the origin not only of heaven and earth and all therein, but also of God himself. In it, the name of Apep is not even mentioned, and it is impossible to explain its appearance in the Apep ritual unless we assume that the whole book was regarded as a spell of the most potent character, the mere recital of which was fraught with deadly effect for Apep and his friends. Oh my God, it's like a curse. The story of the creation is supposed to be told by the god Nebuchadnezzar. And this is what his name looks like. Right there. This name means the Lord to the uttermost limit, and the character of the god suggests that the word limit refers to time and space, and that he was, in fact, the everlasting God of the universe. This god's name occurs in Coptic texts, and he appears as one who possesses all the attributes which are associated by modern nations with God Almighty. So Nebuchadnezzar was like a god that desired to create the world. So he created another god called Khepera. That's the name. Right there. So when this transformation took place, he kind of became this god. The heavens and the earth had not been created yet, or the ocean, which was called Nu. So there was a celestial ocean in this tale that had germs of all the living things, which afterwards took the forms in heaven and on earth. But they existed in a state of inertness and helplessness. Out of this ocean, Khepera raised himself and so passed from a state of passiveness and inertness into one of activity. When Kipara raised himself out of the ocean new, he found himself in vast empty space wherein was nothing on which he could stand. The second version of the legend says that Kipara gave being to himself by uttering his own name, and the first version states that he made use of the words in providing himself with a place on which to stand. In other words, when Kipara was still a portion of the being of Nebuchadnezzar, he spoke the word Kepra, and Kepra came into being. Similarly, when he needed a place whereon to stand, he uttered the name of the thing or place on which he wanted to stand, and that thing or place came into being. This spell he seems to have addressed to his heart, or as we should say, will, so that Kepra willed the standing place to appear, and it did so forthwith. The first version only mentions a heart, but the second also speaks of a heart-soul as assisting Kepra in his first creative acts, and we may assume that he thought out in his heart what manner of thing he wished to create, and then by uttering its name caused his thought to take concrete form. This process of thinking out the existence of things is expressed in Egyptian by words which mean laying the foundation in the heart. Oh my god, what? That's so like philosophical. In arranging his thoughts and their visible forms, Kepra was assisted by the goddess Maat. And Maat always has a feather on her head, and she has a role in the weighing of the heart, which we will look at, who is usually regarded as the goddess of law, order, and truth, and in late times was held to be the female counterpart of Thoth, the heart of the god Ra. In this legend, however, she seems to play the part of wisdom, as described in the book of Proverbs, for it was by Maat that he laid the foundation. Having described the coming into being of Kepra and the place on which he stood, the legend goes on to tell of the means by which the first Egyptian triad, or trinity, came into existence. Kepra had, in some form, union with his own shadow, and so begot offspring, who proceeded from his body under the forms of the gods Shu and Tefnut. According to a tradition preserved in the pyramid texts, this event took place on Heliopolis, and the old form of the legend ascribes the production of Shu and Tefnut to an act of pleasuring themselves. That's what I'm going to say. The Lord possessed me in the beginning of his way before his works of old. This is directly translated. I was set up from everlasting from the beginning, or ever the earth was. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. Before the mountains were settled, before the hills, nor the fields, nor the highest part of the dust of the world. When he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he set a compass upon the face of the depth, when he established the clouds above, when he strengthened the fountains of the deep, when he gave to the sea his decree, when he appointed the foundations of the earth, then I was by him as one brought up with him. Originally, these gods were the personifications of air and dryness and liquids, respectively. Thus, with their creation, the materials for the construction of the atmosphere and sky came into being. Shu and Tefnut were united, and their offspring were Keb, the earth god, and Nut, the sky goddess. We have now 5 gods in existence: Kepra, the creative principle; Shu, the atmosphere; Tefnut, the waters above the heavens; Nut, the sky goddess; and Keb, the earth god. Presumably, about this time, the sun rose first out of the watery abyss of Nu, and shone upon the world and produced day. In early times, the sun, or his light, was regarded as a form of Shu. The gods Kep and Nut were united in an embrace, and the effect of the coming of light was to separate them. As long as the sun shone, as long as it was day, Nut, the sky goddess, remained in her place above the earth, being supported by Shu. But as soon as the sun set, she left the sky and gradually descended until she rested on the body of the earth god, Keb. The embraces of Keb caused Nut to bring forth 5 gods at a birth, namely Osiris, Horus, Set, Isis, I can never say this one, and Nephthys. So they produce children from laying on each other. Just so you know, that's not how it works. Osiris and Isis married before their birth. This is very common for brothers and sisters to marry. Incest was a common thing because you want to keep the bloodline pure. And Isis brought forth a son called Horus. Set and Nephthys also married before their birth, and Nephthys brought forth a son named Anpu, Anubis. God, I actually didn't know that. Though he is not mentioned in the legend. Of these gods, Osiris is singled out for special mention in the legend, in which Khepera, speaking as Nebtertur, says that his name is Osiris, who is the essence of the primeval matter of which he himself is formed. Thus Osiris was of the same substance as the great god who created the world according to the Egyptians, and was a reincarnation of his great-grandfather. This portion of the legend helps to explain the views held about Osiris as the great ancestral spirit, who when on earth was a benefactor of mankind, and who when in heaven was the savior of souls. The legend speaks of the sun as the eye of Khepera, or Nebtertur, and refers to some calamity which befell it and extinguished its light. This calamity may have been simply the coming of night, or eclipses, or storms. But in any case, the god made a second eye, the moon, to which he gave some of the splendor of the other eye, the sun. And he gave it a place in his face, and henceforth it ruled throughout the earth, and had special powers in respect to the production of trees, plants, vegetables, herbs, etc. Thus, from the earliest times of the moon was associated with the fertility of the earth, especially in connection with the production of abundant crops and successful harvests. According to the legend, men and women spring not from earth, but directly from the body of the god Khepera, or Nebtertur, who placed his members together and then wept tears upon them, and men and women came into being from the tears which had fallen from his eye. I haven't read this in a while, and it's very special. I love it. No special mention is made to the creation of beasts in the legend, but the god says that he created creeping things of all kinds, and among these are probably included the larger quadrupeds. The men and women and all the other living creatures which were made at that time reproduced their species, each in its own way, and so the earth became filled with their descendants, which we see at the present time. Such is the legend of creation as it is found in the papyrus of Nesmenu. The text of both versions is full of difficult passages, and some readings are corrupt. Unfortunately, variant versions by which they might be corrected are lacking. The general meaning of the legend in both versions is quite clear, and it throws considerable light on the Egyptian religion. The Egyptians believed in the existence of God, the creator and the maintainer of all things, but they thought that the concerns of this world were committed by him to the superintendence of a series of subordinate spirits or beings called gods, over whom they believed magical spells and ceremonies to have the greatest influence. The deity was a being so remote and of such exalted nature that it was idle to expect him to interfere in the affairs of mortals or to change any decree or command which he had once uttered. The spirits or gods, on the other hand, possessing natures not far removed from those of men, were thought to be amenable to supplications and flattery, and to the wheedling, especially when accompanied by gifts. It is of greatest interest to find a legend in which the power of God as the creator of the world and the sun and moon is so clearly set forth, embedded in a book of magical spells devoted to the destruction of the mythological monster who existed solely to prevent the sun from rising and shining. My God. So that was the first legend. Legends of the Egyptian gods. I definitely want to read more. It helps explain a lot of their artwork and structures, and of course behind me this is the Great Pyramid. This is the pyramid of his son, and then of course over here is the Sphinx. So I hope you enjoyed the first tale, and I hope that you join me for the second one.